The most important thing, the one thing.
Give it to me.
The cop-out answer is, oh, Dan, I'd love to give you one thing, but here's 5 things for you to consider. And then everyone just hangs up, right? Let me not give you a cop-out answer. Let me give you a real answer. The number one thing every sales professional should be thinking when it comes to a presentation is
Welcome back to the Sales Problem Podcast, and welcome to season number 2, episode number 8. And this is the presentation episode, or should I say engaging presentation episode. How many presentations have you attended where you fall asleep at slide number 52 and there's still another 72 slides to go? Our guest today will change your thinking about death by PowerPoint and share some key insights on how to bring your best to the stage in 2024. I'm your host, Steve Comerford, and joining me is my co-host, the always presentable Daniel Burns. Dan, how you feeling today? And what do you got in your coffee mug today?
Death by PowerPoint. Steve, I've experienced it. I've been beaten down to the brink of death by slides myself, but today is not going to be anything like that. It's going to be exciting. And I've brewed up a brew called Zavita Organic. It's a medium dark roast. Overall, really solid pick. It's rich, it's delicious, Steve. And the best part of this coffee is the ROI. Huge bag. I got 3 small bags in one, and fantastic, great value to it. In our rating system, Zavita gets, I'm going to give it 4.6 out of 5 beans, Steve.
4.6. No decimals.
How about
on
you?
4.678. No.
Nope. Right
Okay.
there, but solid ROI. Put some money back in my pocket, and it is a good brew. So how about you? What do you got cooking?
I like the spin on the ROI. My coffee, I've gone back to the Crank Brothers again. This one, because it's a presentation episode, I put this, the coffee is called Fifth Gear, because you always have to shift into an extra gear to be engaging and presentable. So it's an espresso. It's got a little dark chocolate, spice, berries. I give it a 4.899.
Ooh. I think that's our highest rating yet.
And and we have no idea what the rating system's all about, Anil, but hey, that's the way it goes. So let's get cooking. Let's get into our guest today, Dan.
Yes, let's go, Steve.
Yes, let's go. Our guest today is Anil Dilawri. He is the managing director of Save It Like Sully, where he offers customized executive training and coaching. Save It Like Sully has worked with leaders and groups in various industries such as technology, healthcare, consulting, oil and gas, financial services, education, research, associations, and government. His focus is around presentation training and coaching, executive coaching, strategic listening, and the business value of diversity training. I personally have experienced Anil's presentation training in the past, and it definitely hits the mark, Dan. And it really teaches you how to build and deliver impactful presentations. But don't listen to me, Dan. From a senior executive that gave Anil a testimonial, this is what they said. He helped me take my knowledge and experience and convey it in a way that got the audience excited. Today, I'm not only feel better about my presentations, but I feel my audience is more engaged. They understand me better. And I consistently get very positive feedback about my presentations. Kind of a drop the mic moment. So with that, Anil, welcome to the Sales Problem Podcast. Excited to have you here today. And how are you feeling? And tell our listeners a little bit about you and Save It Like Sully.
I'm doing great, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I've been so looking forward to this opportunity to talk to you. I love sales. I love sales presentations. I think every presentation is a sales presentation. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you about this today. Thanks for the kind introduction. Save It Like Sully is a really weird company. Almost all we do is talk to leaders like you about presentations. They could be really, really small presentations internal within an organization where, say, a leader's updating two colleagues on a project they're working on. It can be a very large presentation at a conference. You're representing your company in front of 500 people, and kind of everything in between those two. I love talking about presentations. I'm glad you mentioned strategic listening. I hope we get an opportunity to talk a little bit about that today, because I think in the sales realm, for sales professionals, I think adding strategic listening in as a component of how you present is critical, absolutely critical. But thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, Anil, it's exciting to have you on it. And I like that testimony talked about getting people engaged. I'm an energy guy, so I love that. There's nothing worse than sitting through a presentation and thinking, when is this going to end? And there's such a big difference when you're sitting in a presentation and you're going, oh my God, I love every word that's coming out of the presenter's mouth. I'm learning, I'm engaged. So I'm excited to see what the differences are in doing that. The first question I've got for you, Anil, is one where we kind of open it up that you just get to drop the mic. Our listeners are out there, they're making sales calls. They may have to turn off the podcast for a little while. So we want to hit them with the good stuff right away. So if you had the stage, you were going to do a presentation, but you only had one point that you could make to our listeners, what from your background is the most important thing that you can share with our audience?
The most important thing, the one thing.
Give it to me.
The cop-out answer is, oh, Dan, I'd love to give you one thing, but here's 5 things for you to consider. And then everyone just hangs up, right? Let me not give you a cop-out answer. Let me give you a real answer. The number one thing every sales professional should be thinking when it comes to a presentation is good, effective, efficient preparation. You need to be ready for this stuff. And too often I see corporate presenters, especially in sales, and they're just not ready. Now, ready means more than just practicing your presentation. That's a key element of it. But it also means things like technical preparation. It means like audience analysis, knowing who you are actually speaking to or about to speak to. It's critical. Here's the problem. And when I bring this up in our training sessions and my one-on-one coaching with leaders, I hate bringing this stat up. I hate it. It's my least favorite part. But preparation, less than half of you will do it. Like less than half of sales professionals will actually do it. And not for a good reason. The reason why is this word in our culture. You know it very well. It's busy. Anil, I just got too busy. Just realize the best presenters in the world, literally, they're probably busier than you and I combined. Yet somehow, some way, they find time to prepare and practice for these critical presentations. And every sales professional listening to this presentation, listening to this podcast, you're arguably delivering the most important presentations in the company today, the day that you're presenting. The most important ones. Yet somehow, we're busy. I've got, emails to respond to. I've got documents to create. I've got people to hire. I've got people to fire. I've got to buy some shoes on Amazon. I get it. We're busy, but we need to find time strategically within our calendar, chunking it out to prepare. That's my number one thing by far. And it's less than half of us actually will do it.
I know. I love that answer. And I hope our audience really keyed in on that, because I love the phrase, preparation creates separation. I think it's one of those critical factors that the difference between a pro and an amateur is just how much practice they put in, how much preparation, all the things that you just mentioned. So absolutely love that. Do you think that there is something that is, like I see a lot of people just kind of wing it? Yep. Is there a resistance that gets in the way? What do you think stops people from wanting to kind of practice their craft or get up there and deliver something that is a high level versus just kind of mailing it in a little bit?
Yeah. Winging it is something that, and sales professionals don't have a monopoly on winging it. There's a lot of presenters who just say, oh no, I'm actually good at winging it. Just realize that I, and likely you, can probably tell when someone's winging it, even when they're quote unquote good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we do it? Again, there's the busy excuse, but also it's uncomfortable. It's tiring. It's time consuming. Some people find it boring.
Mm-hmm.
I always say to clients, though, that's okay. Just realize it works. It works approximately 100% of the time. Guys, I have yet to see a client. Seriously, out of 15 years of doing this, I have yet to see a client who got worse as they practiced more. I haven't seen it yet. I've heard people say, "Oh, Anil, careful, you can over-prepare." I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen anyone who've gotten worse as they prepare. So realizing that it works approximately 100% of the time is a great way of getting yourself to do it. But it's uncomfortable. Even in our virtual environment, I'm asking people, I've asked clients and have sat with them while they do it. I've asked them to set up their computer. I've asked them to look at the black dot. I've asked them to say their presentation out loud with no one else in the room other than me. And you can feel it. They're like, for the first 30 seconds, they're like, this is weird. This is uncomfortable. What am I doing? And then after the first 30 seconds, they're like, wait a minute, I'm actually doing a pretty poor job of this presentation. I'm really happy that I'm going through this preparation cycle. Thank goodness Anil mentioned it to me. I need to work on this. I need to get the words out a little smoother. Yeah.
And we've all seen some train wrecks from people that are not prepared. I mean, it's painful, cringy almost to watch somebody when they're, really crashing and burning up in front of an entire audience. So transitions to the next question. Tell us about a presentation where it just went the wrong way. Maybe it wasn't necessarily preparation, but it crashed and it burned. It wasn't what you expected. And what's the takeaway or the lesson when you get up there and something just completely bombs?
Yeah, awesome. Let me tell you about Jim. Jim's not his real name. Jim's a senior vice president with an organization. This was in the early days of Save It Like Sully. I was asked by this organization's accountants. Now, no offense against accountants, but they're not necessarily the best judges of great presentations themselves. But the accountants invited me, and they're like, just can you come watch Jim speak? I'm like, yeah, sure. We think he needs some help. And I watched Jim, and it was a horrible presentation. Senior vice president of the organization, smart, bright, intelligent, great leader, horrible presenter. Here's what he did wrong in a nutshell. First of all, he was all over the place, very scattered. In 27 different points to bring up during his 25-minute presentation. It was just scattered. It was too much. So there was no structure to his presentation. It was the epitome of boring. It was a bunch of corporate talking points and corporate bullet points. Number two, his slides. This is everyone's favorite topic, right? Everyone loves talking about slides. His slides were jam-packed with information. He had too many slides, too much stuff on the slides. I turned around and kind of watched his audience while he was delivering a bit. Everyone laser focused on the slides. No one laser focused on him. That was 2 slides. 3 was physical delivery. That's where your expertise comes in, Dan, right? Like strategic use of his feet, his hands, his eyes, his voice, his executive presence as he was presenting just was non-existent. He stood behind a podium, hands shaking, gripping the podium like it was a roller coaster ride. Lastly, he wasn't ready. Preparation. He was not ready for that presentation. You could tell by him reading a script word for word. At certain points, he would turn around and look at his own slide and start reading it word for word. You've never seen that before, right? Where a person's reading their slides. It was a horrible, horrible presentation. Funny enough, I actually never got a chance to work with Jim one-on-one or in a group session. The response back when I kind of gave him a score on how he did was that, oh no, Jim's actually a really good presentation. He was just a bit off that day. He was a bit off that day in front of a crucial audience of about 85 people who were buyers of his stuff. Lost opportunity.
Just listening to that, Anil, I was feeling the pain as you described it. And it actually did trigger quite a few that I've seen with similar things. So I think,
and we've all seen it, right? We've all seen the train wrecks on a regular basis. Some of us quite regularly. It's like, oh wow, another horrible presentation. It's a big problem out there. That's why I like talking to sales professionals, because, well, it's only their personal credibility and it's only their paycheck on the line. So we might as well, put the effort into becoming better at it.
Yeah, I'd say I love the point you bring up about winging it, Anil. I hear that way too often. Oh, I'll just don't worry about all that preparation stuff. I'll just fly with what happens.
Yeah,
good luck with that.
Winging it. Let me just bring up one thing about winging it. People say, okay, well, preparation, I don't want to be stilted. I don't want to be overly scripted. Hello, Dan and Steve, how are you today? I don't want to be over scripted. I'm like, well, preparation or non-winging it, it's not memorizing a script. It's merely you becoming comfortable with your stuff. Like you as two sales professionals, you know your stuff. I just want you to be comfortable delivering your stuff in a high executive presence way when you're in front of your prospects or clients. That's what preparation does.
Well, I'd like to go a little deeper on the preparation, because I feel the problem that we have a lot of the times is that you have 100 pages, you get the deck from corporate, and you have to deliver it, right? If it's a U.S. corporation and you're the Canadian division, and then you have to relay everything, and the preparation does not get into dissecting the deck and then making it impactful for the group. That's where I really find a lot of the is it laziness or just I feel I need to cover everything on the deck.
Laziness, fear. I like, if we go higher level, I think a lot of the main reasons why we tend as a society not to be good at this is not because we weren't born with the skill. This is a learned, practiced skill. No one came out of the womb a great presenter. This is a learned, practiced skill. And we, in general, are not taught how to do this. We were not taught how to organize a presentation. We were not taught how to actually use PowerPoint to help us, not hurt us. We weren't taught about physical delivery and what elevating our executive presence means. And we weren't taught how to practice and prepare. Usually around grade 3, grade 4, depending on your education system, little Dan was asked, right?
Yeah.
We all remember that.
Yeah.
And little Dan was like, "Oh, gee, my tummy doesn't feel so good doing this. I don't think I want to do this, Mrs. Teacher." And then the teacher said, "No, seriously, go at the front of the room and do it." The teacher telling you to do it is not teaching you how to do it. It's kind of trial by fire. And then we wonder why we grow up as adults and hate presenting or are not really good at presenting. So it's a learned practice skill. So that, combined with the fact that, there is some laziness involved. But you mentioned slides, Steve. Slides are a huge problem in that they can work so well in a sales presentation, but I find most slides are working against a presenter in a sales environment as opposed to for a presenter. Too much stuff on the slides, too many slides, too much focus on the slides. The reality, and you guys are experts at this, you know this, the reality is they're buying you as much as they're buying the product or service that you're selling. So why so much focus and attention on the slide? And it's really culture. As you said, corporate gives us a slide deck. We feel obliged to present the slide deck as they've created it. And I just think that mentality is somewhat misplaced.
So Dan and I catch on to what you talk about. Like, who are the clients that are catching on to your way of looking at presentations, and what's their what's your process in helping them through that? Getting more effective at their presentations.
Good question. Clients come to me in a couple of different ways. One is the client that is very self-aware and says, gee, our sales staff, they're really good people. I just question whether we're doing these presentations all that well. I question whether, as you said, we're differentiating ourselves here with our presentations. We need to go to another level. And I love getting those calls from sales leaders who say, let's just take our sales team to another level. And then I'll tell you how we work with those teams in a second. The other kind of client who approaches me is the one where something has gone wrong or not as well as they wanted it to. Think of a staff meeting or a sales kickoff where a sales professional has been asked to get at the front of the room, or a sales leader is at the front of the room, and everyone's watching them present, and everyone's kind of looking at each other going, what is this? What's going on here? This is horrendous. And there's a problem. Something's gone wrong or didn't meet expectations. And then they put the call out saying, I think we've got to work on this. So that's generally how things get started. And then I introduce the concept of a group training session, in your case with a sales team. But really, it's not just sales. It's anyone who's presenting important presentations throughout the organization. So I've dealt with HR teams, dealt with operations teams, marketing teams, finance teams, some of my favorite, R&D, engineering teams, you name it. Anyone who's delivering an important presentation. Senior executive teams, sometimes working with boards of directors. Anyone who presents key presentations. We introduce the idea of a group session where we all kind of get on the same page. This is what presentation excellence means. There are some clients who are like, okay, we don't want a group session. We want to hone in on this one leader or this one high potential employee. And we need to invest in them and double down on them and make them a better presenter. That's cool too. We do that a lot. Something that's probably one of the more popular things is when we combine the two. So it's a nice hybrid. We do a group training session and then do some mini one-on-ones with each individual after that. It's probably the most popular offering we have. And then we teach the fundamentals of presentation excellence with them. We see them implement it with their presentations, and we let them go off and be great presenters and then modify their personal models going forward.
Nice. I like the point that you bring up about all of the different components of an organization and the importance of presenting. When you bring up finance or R&D or operations, it's neglected in that they have a very important role in the organization in promoting what they do, showcasing what they're trying to improve, how they're trying to really bring the corporation forward, and how that could benefit sales, right? Everything is, I find everything gets tagged to sales, and they need to be the big presenters and engaging and tie up the room. But it's so often, it's that internal team that really needs to up their game. So I'm glad you brought that up. The question then is, on that vein, is we're virtual right now, so many webinars, so many virtual meetings. Where is that in your process of teaching and helping organizations have better online meetings?
Yeah, the pandemic has made this business so interesting. I would say pre-pandemic, the majority of clients that I dealt with were in Canada and the US. And what the pandemic did was really make it a global business. So during the last 3.5 years, I've dealt with clients all over the world. And we're a click away from presenting virtually with anyone in the world. And that is a whole other skill to have. Everything that I mentioned for in-person presentations still applies. So we still want a well-organized, well-structured presentation that includes stories, examples, all that. We still want slides that work for us, not against us. Nice, simple, not complex slides. That still applies in a virtual setting. Physical delivery is an interesting one. So we typically, in an in-person environment, talk about, your executive presence, strategic use of your feet, your hands, your eyes, your voice. And in a virtual environment, we're talking about strategic use of your head, your hands, your eyes, and your voice. So there's a slight difference there. And that's where we can kind of hone in on a virtual environment, enhancing our executive presence in a virtual environment. Preparation is the exact same. We need to be ready. Good audience analysis, good technical preparation, and we need to practice our very key, very important presentations. So Steve, there are a lot of parallels between virtual and in-person, but there are some nuanced differences which people just aren't good at. Again, no one's born great being a great virtual presenter. It's a learned practice skill.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting part is hybrid, and hybrid has been very popular over the last year and a half as organizations get back to more in-person. And you see this happen in sales environments where like, Dan, we really like you. Let's have you come in and do the pitch, but we want our engineering team to be there. We want our operations team to be there, and kind of procurement as well, obviously. Now, they're scattered all over the world. So some of us are going to be here in the office with you, and most of us are going to be online. Come on in and wow us with your presentation. And that hybrid environment for the sales professional is messy. It is messy. And there's a bunch of areas we could go into. One, my favorite is visual bias. So visual bias says the three people who are here in the room with me, like they're right here. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're here with me right here after so many years. And we have visual bias. We look at them and talk to them and smile at them and take their questions. And then around minute 20 of the 25-minute meeting, we say, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of people here online via Zoom or Teams. Folks, did you have any questions? We tend to neglect them online a little bit. In some cases, they're the key buyers, the key decision makers. So we need to be very cognizant of what we're doing with our eyes and with our attention. It's great to talk to these people that we love here in the room with us, but to go back to this ridiculous black dot every now and then, realizing that that black dot represents the key buyer and the 16 influencers that we need to communicate with as well. Hybrid is messy. It's tough. We're going to get better at it as we train more organizations on it, but it's very tough.
I guess a good point there would be really understanding who your audience is and where they are. The other one that comes up too, right? If we get Dan in to do a presentation, how can you coach him on engaging that audience? Like, it's oftentimes, make it an engaging presentation and pull those people in. Like, how do you do that? Like, are there some good tips there?
Well, Dan himself is the epitome of engagement, right? Dan doesn't have an engagement problem. He is Mr. Engagement. But the majority of us lack that self-awareness. We think we're engaging, but we're not. I think engagement is a critical part of any sales presentation. We think the content is most important. I've had sales professionals say this to me. Anil, content is king here. I'm like, oh, okay. Content is king. Oh, yeah, okay, I get that. I agree with that. Content is very, very important. But what if I told you engagement is the queen, right? Where you could literally have the best content in the world, but if it's not engaging, it's no longer the best content in the world. It's no longer the best sales presentation in the world. It's just another boring business presentation. Tips on how to be more engaging. There's so many. I think the number one thing to be more engaging, and I love bringing this up, especially to sales teams, is the use of the story, the example, or the anecdote. Stories are critical in every sales presentation. We need at least one story in every sales presentation that's out there. And I believe the reason why is very strategic. I, as the sales professional, the buyer has a bias against me because they think I'm just interested in selling them whatever. I just want the deal. And in some cases, that is the case. But really, we're looking to solve a problem here. We're looking to solve the buyer's problem. But with this bias, they may have this thing against us where, okay, well, he'll say anything to get the deal, or she'll say anything to get the deal. So as soon as we launch into a story or an example of another client that is successful, so let me give you an example of an example. We're in a sales situation and the buyer says to me, I'm not totally convinced that you're the vendor for us. Now, we're insulted by that and we don't know why, but we turn it around and say, okay, I get that. Let me tell you the story of ABC Company, because when I hear you talk, Mr. Buyer, when I hear you talk, I'm hearing this problem, this problem, this problem. It reminds me so much of Company ABC. Company ABC had this issue, and this issue, very similar to you. We offered them this. We worked with them in this way. Solved their issue in this amount of time for this amount of money. Why don't we just do the same? Like, they're very similar issues. Actually, if you want, you can talk to Company ABC. If you want, we'll give you their number. They're a great customer referral for us. Don't believe me. Believe the story that I told you about Company ABC, because they're very similar to you. That is a engagement technique, is far more effective than showing up with a bunch of slides with the corporate bullet points. That tends not to be super engaging. That's just one example of an engagement technique.
Anil, I can't wait to go back and listen to this podcast myself, because there's so many things that you've said that I'm like, yes, and yes. I can't wait to listen to it all again. But I do want to come back to one thing. A while back, you mentioned being in front of a room full of buyers and that presentation then being a big opportunity. And for salespeople, I just wanted to put an exclamation point on that, because I don't know that all salespeople look to set themselves up with those types of opportunities,
right?
And look to use that skill of presenting and being a strong presenter to get themselves in a room where there's 50, 60, 100 prospects, instead of trying to do all the work kind of door by door. And if they've got this skill, how huge of an opportunity is that they could leverage that?
Massive, just huge. And this is where I'm talking about strategic preparation. So you remember I mentioned audience analysis, and I put that in preparation by design. So audience analysis is looking at the meeting invite that the buyer has sent you, and you know that, okay, there's going to be 5 people in this meeting. But a week ahead of time, you kind of put that call in, say, hey, Stacy, I'm looking so forward to coming in and presenting to you next week. Hey, listen, I think that the presentation is going to go really well because I plan on covering this, and this. I'm just wondering who's going to be there. So you're not playing dumb, but you just want to verify who's going to be there. How many people are going to be there? What are their roles in the organization? And we get to find out who the influencer is, who the buyer is, who the decision maker is. Their positive and negative biases towards you, your company, your product, your service. And then, Stacy, is there any specific questions that you think those particular people may have that my presentation, as I've talked to you about here, won't address? I just want to be ready for that Q&A. So Stacy wants you to succeed. There's a reason why she's invited you in. So take that opportunity to effectively ask those audience analysis questions. Then we can take the next step and say, right, Bill, Steve, Dan, Stacy, and Julie are in the meeting. Got it. Who from HR is going to be there? And they're like, no one from HR. Okay, we deal with a lot of people in HR. HR tends to be a key stakeholder here. If I may, if you would like, or I would recommend inviting someone from HR and finance into the meeting, just to be a fly on the wall, just to hear what we're saying, what we've got, and some of the issues that we're solving for you. We tend to kill a lot of birds with one stone. So feel free to invite them in. Next thing you know, you've just increased your funnel, right? Because the person from HR is there and the person from finance is there. And this wasn't even on their radar screen at all, yet they got invited by this leader to this important vendor meeting, and you dazzled them with an incredible presentation, and they're like, you know what, we would like to work with you. Let's come on in, work with us in the HR team, because we have the same issues as well. Never knew they were issues, but after your presentation, kind of was very clear that we have the issues. Strategic audience analysis can really work.
I love that point, because you're really setting the room up for yourself, is what I'm hearing. Is you're getting all the key stakeholders too into the same room, so everybody gets that complete message. You're not missing pieces, and it's going to accelerate the sale. Hey,
Right.
I want to transition over to somebody who's listening, who might be going into a presentation in the next couple weeks. They're hearing all this. They're going, great. I'm not super experienced. How do you coach executives so that they can really focus in on the more important aspects of going into a boardroom, going into a meeting? If I think about what I've heard so far, there's the slides, but there's also the body language, there's the tone. And one of the things I'm curious on is, what's the best way to start that presentation? Because I think people lose people right from the start, and it's that critical moment. Is there a way that you coach people to really, okay, here's a couple things to focus on, and how would they start to put their best foot forward?
I love that one. Very, very strategic. An often neglected part of the presentation is the start. Dan, the research is telling us that if you get them at the start, like if you get them with something at the start of your presentation, usually within the first minute, if you get them in the first minute, you have them for 12 minutes. You can be talking about the most boring corporate update in the history of the world. They'll listen to you because you kind of got them with something at the start.
Okay.
I want each and every person to listening to this, to think of that. How are you starting your next presentation? The majority of us are saying something like, hi, my name's Stacy. I'm from company ABC, and today I'm going to cover this. Nothing inherently wrong with that, other than the fact that that's the way every sales presentation in the history of the world ever started. Right? How are you differentiating yourself? How are you setting yourself apart? So what if you started with something that got them? Example, hey, thanks so much for inviting me in here today, folks. My name's Stacy. I'm from ABC Company. Today, I've been so excited about today's presentation because we've worked with many organizations like yours. And specifically, we work with company XYZ, and we're able to save them $373,000 last quarter just through use of our software. Let me get into some of the details. Boom. Right there, you're like, what did she just say? She say what? You've worked with companies like ours, and you're saving them. Okay, you know what? I'm going to text my friend a little bit later. I'm going to doodle on this sheet of paper a little bit later. I'm going to listen to what she has to say. Then you've got them. Then it's up to you to engage them for that 12 minutes and beyond, but you've got them at the start. Incredible opportunity at the start of your next presentation to just kind of get them, get their interest, and suck their attention into you.
You just dropped that in there so smoothly too, that if I was listening to the presentation, you would have got that reaction. Did he just say, 300?
And it doesn't, that was a little bit dramatic.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be overly dramatic.
Yeah.
It could be something as simple as, thanks so much for inviting me in today. I'm not one of these sales representatives or account executives that comes in and bores you for an hour with a presentation.
Yeah.
Here's how things are going to work today. I'm going to give you a quick 10 to 15 minute presentation on how we've succeeded with a bunch of clients like you. After that, I'm going to open it up because then I want to hear from you as to what your real problems and pain are and whether anything that I've said has resonated. Let's get into it. Boom. It's like, whoa, you're not going to show up and throw up at us? That's the way every other vendor does it. Okay, I like you. I like you already. You're only going to give us a 10-minute presentation? Wow, that's awesome. No one ever said, I really like Stacy's presentation. I just wish it was longer. Right? No one ever says that. So when you come in with short, crisp, effective presentations, you make a lot of friends.
Oh, I really love that. I want to keep riffing on this a little bit because I think things are changing. When we talk about the audience, sometimes they know more about our products and our company than we would expect because information is everywhere. So the traditional approach of, here's our headquarters in Hackensack, New Jersey, and let me take 5 slides to tell you about our founder and how everything developed over the last 165 years.
Horrible. Horrible.
I see people just kind of losing, at that game. So what would you say is a way to kind of make people more engaged, have things be more interactive? Or I'm curious on emotional versus rational, using stats to really kind of get people's attention, knowing that some people are analytical. And then how do you kind of tug at the heartstrings, knowing that there might be some emotional people in there, or at least drop some things in there that are a little more like you did in the last example, they're a little clickbaity or things like that. How do you measure that recipe out?
Yeah, I think that the key to measuring that recipe out is to just always thinking of the person on the other end of the table and thinking, is this engaging for them? It may be engaging for you or important in your mind, but is it engaging for them? You bring up the great point of, the person who's more analytical and more statistics oriented. Nothing wrong with presenting a few statistics in your presentation. When we take a statistic and then back it up with a story, again, we're hitting both areas and both kind of buyers in the perfect way. So give me the stat, but then give me that example or story behind it. Give me the corporate bullet point that some people love, but then give me the story or example behind it so that it resonates with everyone. So that's one engagement technique. The other one I like, and this is kind of tactical, but I'll get into it, is the idea of, again, it's the antithesis, the opposite of show up and throw up. It's, I'm going to present something. I'm going to present for a while. Maybe it's along a time frame, 5 or 10 minutes. Maybe it's along a slide count. So I'm going to present the first 3 slides, but then I'm going to stop. And some people actually say, and I love it when sales professionals do this and they listen to our coaching around it. They say, let me just stop there for a second. I've been talking too much already. Let me stop there. Has anything that I've said resonated with you yet? And if so, what? And then they answer the question, and now you know. Now you know where to double click. Now you know. Now we're no longer guessing as to, man, I hope this is engaging. Oh, wow, I hope that is engaging. Maybe my 5th point will be engaging. It's kind of like throwing spaghetti against a wall and hoping it sticks. Why don't we ask them? And let me stop there for a second. I've mentioned 3 things already. Has any of that resonated with you? Do you have any of those issues in your organization? Oh, you do? Okay, great. Oh, you don't? Okay, let me go and delve down 2 areas, or let me just stop completely and say, what is the number one concern you have when it comes to this, or this? Oh, okay. Now you know. And now you know the area that you can present, and you can throw out 94 of the 100 slides and say, let me hone in on slide number 67 to 70. And that's really all you're really interested in. Great. Let's do that.
Yeah, it's such a great point that you make. One of the best things I think has been said on this podcast is what you just said, which is, thinking about that listener. And the thing I'm curious on is that kind of one of the mistakes you see frequently is that people are presenting from their perspective. Our company does this. I do that. I've done that. A lot of I, and not this is about you. They make themselves the hero of the stories or of the presentation, and the client is kind of somewhere else, but not quite connected.
This is it. This is where I think strategic listening needs to be such a very important component of our presentations. That sounds counterintuitive. I've been asked to show up and speak and deliver a presentation. What do you mean? Just be quiet and listen. Well, as soon as we strategically listen, learn to take the word in, what comes out from a communication standpoint ends up being so much better. So much better. Being a sales professional, an account executive, is very difficult. We want to solve their problems, but we don't know what their problems are until we ask, right? Until we actually hear it from them. So if you're in a sales environment where you've been invited to come in and pitch, but you haven't had that pre-pitch talk yet as to what really is the top of mind problem for them, then let's incorporate that listening component into your presentation. That's tough to do. That's gutsy to do. It works almost 100% of the time. Now, very seldom are you going to have a buyer who says, no, I don't want to tell you my problems. I would rather waste my next 30 minutes in listening to you to present stuff that I don't want. Very seldom, right?
Is
the
that
buyers usually, we have this problem. Go ahead, go. Tell us what you got. Okay, thank you. Now I know what to present.
Yeah.
And what not to present.
Is that where you go on the strategic listening? Dan always tells me I'm not a good listener. So is that where you go with the coaching and training is how to effectively pull that in and then be able to pivot?
Yeah, I'm one of the few who loves talking about listening. This is a cultural problem we have, right? We tend not to be focused on taking the word in. And we are very, very focused on getting the word out. But like I said, when we strategically listen, it really helps the whole communication process. And in your case, the whole sales process just becomes way better when we really get strategic about listening. Really quick, when I talk to clients about strategic listening, usually it's a group training session. So we actually spend a couple hours with a group in the client talking about what strategic listening actually means. We talk about bad listening, why we are bad listeners as a society. We talk about good listening, great tips, tricks, ideas, techniques on how we can become better listeners and continuously work on it for the remainder of our career. And then we end off the session with a really nice, neat, friendly challenge to everyone who's in the group. Because everyone has the same reaction, like, wow, this is great. And they're all nodding their heads. And then, 2 weeks later, they forget it all. So the challenge is to kind of follow up with them after and say, okay, how have you implemented this? How have you implemented being a better listener, more strategic listener into your life? The neat byproduct, guys, the neat byproduct to the strategic listening sessions is we get a lot of feedback from clients saying, this helped our team so much. This helped our clients so much. But it really helped us in our personal lives. Like, we were doing a horrible job of listening to our partners, our kids, our friends, and we started implementing this in our personal life, and it was a huge difference. So, yeah, I love talking about listening. It's another thing that we weren't taught, right? I'm going to go back to little Dan again. Little Dan, and usually around kindergarten, his teacher says, hey, kids, class, listen. At no point did little Dan at the back of the room put up his hand and say, excuse me, teacher, like, how do I do that? Like, what's the 12-step process of listening? Usually, if they were asked, the teacher would just say, well, just close your mouth and listen, which is one of the processes for sure. But there's so much more to it. It's part of the main reasons why we as a society just aren't good at this listening thing.
I remember my going to the parent-teacher interviews when my kids were in elementary school, and it was always like, your boys just don't, focus. They're just not focused in class. And it's like, and then years later, they turned out to be exceptional people. It's like, what do you mean by focus? Like, I don't understand. And to your point around, listening, help me with that one. But I want to get to the shy, reserved person that says, I'm not really good at presenting. I'm going to give that to Dan. I'll let Dan do the presenting. but that person is wanting to build their career, wanting to be more successful, wanting to engage with their clients better. What do you do with that shy, reserved person? And how do you get them either out of that comfort zone or make them better at that piece of what they need to do in their career?
I'm so glad you asked that question, Steve. Shy, reserved, let's use the word introvert. Introverts, shy people, they actually tend to be the better presenters in corporate land. Some people may be surprised to hear that. And there's a bunch of reasons why, not the least of which is they tend to be a lot more honed in on preparation and the process of preparation. Actually, I'll pull this book off my shelf here. I'm a card-carrying introvert myself, and this book here I'm holding in front of people, it's called Quiet by Susan Cain. The subtitle is The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking.
I have that book as well.
Yeah, the introverts it's a wonderful book. Introverts are very powerful presenters. And as opposed to, if you're a shy, quiet, introverted person, first of all, congratulations on getting into sales. I think you'll probably be an above average sales performer as well for a bunch of other reasons. Second is, I think you have the opportunity to be a remarkable presenter. Just stick to your process. Don't be so infatuated with, well, I need to be more extroverted in order to be successful. I just don't think that's the case. I think you need to really think about your presentation from a strategic organization perspective. I need you to have really good, simple slides. I think you need to think about your executive presence. And I think you need to be prepared and have the process of practicing your presentation in a really good way. If you do all those things as an introvert, people won't sit there in your audience. The buyer won't sit there and say, wow, he's really quiet. I don't know if we can buy from him. Instead, they may say, wow, it's a good presenter. When we first met, he seemed kind of quiet, but when he got into this presentation thing, he was quite good. I'm interested in listening to him a bit more. I kind of trust him a little bit more. It was neat to see the way he very effectively presented that. And all of that was done from the quiet, shy introvert. Stick with the process.
I like that. And I like the point about not having to be somebody else, right? Not faking it that you have to be some gregarious presenter and that's the only way to do it. It's trusting in who you are and then back to your preparation and process. Love that piece.
Yeah, it's so key. I hesitate to whether to bring this up. I hate the term "fake it till you make it."
So do I.
I hate that term. We're not looking to deceive anyone. We're not looking to fake it. We just want to be ready, right? We just want to be ready for this great opportunity to talk to a potential customer and convince them of something that we have helped so many other customers with. We're not faking anything. We're presenting really, really great stuff.
Yeah, just one last question. I'll pass it over to you, Dan. But in your work that you do you do a lot of team? You talk about group sessions, but I also find that feedback is missing as well. So Dan and I are really good. I feel we're really good. That we, if he's up on stage,
of course you are.
I give him feedback. He likes it sometimes, but vice versa. So do you find that's a really key thing in really elevating your game?
Yeah, feedback is invaluable. I think we need to be careful with feedback.
Okay.
And here's what I mean by that. So, for instance, let's put you in a sales team environment where, Steve, you're, of course, the sales manager and you've got your team. And Steve, you're a good presenter. You do well at it. You go through the process well. And then you have another person on your team and you've seen them present and you're saying, okay, it was an okay presentation. I just need you to do this, 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 and this. Now, those 4 things may work really well for you. but they may not work really well for everyone. Too often we think every presenter on our team, on our sales team, needs to be the exact same. The reality is presenters are like fingerprints, right? Each and every one is different. And each and every one has their own kind of quirks and individual styles. So this is the advantage of bringing in an outsider to say, okay, yeah, I'm aware of the myriad of different presentation styles. What I may say as a point of feedback to Dan would be very different from a point of feedback to Steve, based on their different personalities, their different strengths, their different weaknesses. Feedback is very, very important, but we can't use broad strokes, broad brushes of feedback with everyone.
So Anil, you've sparked a question that I think is going to be really crucial to our listeners, and I have to say too that I'm big on listening. And little Dan back in school, probably not the best listener, but I would say since becoming a coach, it is the skill that I consistently have to practice all the time. And I've gotten lots of people on my sales team that have said, oh, I think I talked too much this entire meeting because you didn't say anything. And I said, yeah, I was listening. I wanted to hear our buyer and I wanted to know what they were thinking and give them the space to share. So do you feel like that's a missing component maybe for some people, is that they're listening so that they can respond versus listening so that they can truly understand what is this person's needs? What's the problem here I'm trying to solve, and trying to hear those components versus waiting to speak.
Yes, Dan. Golden. Listening to respond as opposed to listening to find out and serve better. We call that reloading, right? Reloading is me thinking about what I want to say next. You thinking about what you want to say next is not listening. It's you thinking about what you want to say next. So that's a huge problem. I think there's a huge link between strategic listening and respect. So I appreciate your point about, as a coach, doing in your coaching business. And I think sales leaders are coaches as well, right? Yeah. You want to listen effectively so that you can communicate and coach better. Here's the ironic thing. I mean, that's a very key component. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Not interrupting, very key component. But one of the things that surprises people a little bit is that good strategic listening, and this is especially the case in a sales environment, is actually good two-way dialogue. Sounds counterintuitive. I know. Wait, me talking is good listening? Let me give you an example. Let's say Steve and I are talking and I'm very into what he's saying and I'm doing a great job of strategically listening. I'm not interrupting. I'm not reloading. I'm listening to what he says. And then he naturally comes to the end of his point, at the end of his sentence. And I pause for a second and I say, Steve, that was good. What else? And then I just go back into shut up mode. And Steve's like, oh my gosh, I love this guy. He gives me a what else? And then he comes out with even more.
Yeah.
That is two-way dialogue. I actually said something. Now I said it was just a little bit, and it may go longer. Hey, Steve, you mentioned this, and this in what you just said. Can you tell me more about that? I'm not sure I totally understand. Tell me more. Back into listening mode. When we do that effectively, and again, that's a learned, practiced skill. That is not easy to do. We love talking. So you're right. In a coaching realm, and a lot of our sales leaders are coaches as well, listening is so important strategically.
Oh, this is a masterclass on for all salespeople. You got to get those questions into your repertoire if you're not doing that today. So I want to shift over to video, because video is a way to present, get your message across. Is it different when you're on camera versus in front of a live audience? Would you say there are aspects where you might change some things up? How do you, or I guess the other part of the question is, do you recommend times where the presenter shuts up and puts on a video to kind of break up the cadence of how everything's being presented?
Yeah, I love video. I think video is a killer app now and going forward for our presentations. Now, we need to be careful because presentations evolve and have changed over time. So as an example, 5 to 7 years ago, I would have said, yeah, show a video during your presentation. Nothing more than 3 minutes in length. Today, 2023, going into 2024, I'd say no more than 60 seconds with your video. To your point, great way of breaking up, especially a slightly longer presentation. So you've been asked to come in for, 45 minute to an hour long pitch presentation. Throwing in a video or two, I think, is golden. I think it's a great way of breaking it up and having contrast in your presentation. I think for our technology clients out there who are big on providing demos, I think demos are dangerous, as we all know, right? They can blow up right there in front of the client, a live demo. So incorporate it into a video. Hey, let's show you our product in action. Boom, launch the video. There it is, working perfectly. And then you stop the video at the end. Any questions on that short little demo? We showed 4 great features, functionalities. You notice how they logged in via the single sign-on and did some great things. Any questions about the demo? Video is a killer app. I think we should be thinking about incorporating it when it makes sense for us. That may not be every presentation, Dan. That may not be every presentation, but every now and then in certain circumstances, it can really be an asset for us.
I like that it gives, as a presenter, it gives you that little pause too, where you can grab a little sip of water, or you can kind of refocus yourself and the audience is engaged watching something. And if there's humor and things that you can add in there, you don't have to come up with all the, the laughs and things. You can use somebody else's shtick to help warm up the audience.
Which is a sales technique, right? I'm not the know-all, be-all person here with our organization. I'm merely quarterbacking, bringing in a bunch of assets for you, the buyer, to see what works best for you. And the video just happens to be one of those assets.
Well, hey, Dan, this has been a golden episode. So much stuff. The things I've listened, I'm practicing. So here's what I heard today. 1, preparation. That was right off the bat. In terms of being prepared. The other one is follow the process, because I think, to your point on introverts, just stay with what works and what delivers. And then the other one is practicing. I think that was the other key. And incorporating some effective listening throughout that process. So you make sure that you're on track with the client in front of you and understand the audience. The last part, Anil, that I found is that I need to be nicer to Dan when I provide him feedback. That I will be from the heart.
What works for you might not work for Dan, and that's okay.
Yes, all good. So with that, Anil, can you tell our listeners how they can find you, what you're up to next, and a little bit about what's going on with you?
First of all, Steve, Dan, thank you for this. I've had a blast today talking to you about presentations and strategic listening. Thank you for inviting me. It's been real fun. You can find me at saveitLikeSully.com. Save It Like Sully is a very strange name for a company, but it's very easy to find online. SaveItLikeSully.com. I love working with teams, not only sales teams, but any team throughout the country, throughout the continent, throughout the world. Going forward, Save It Like Sully into 2024 has some exciting things going on. We've got some fantastic new clients worldwide that we're delving into kind of their strategic communications and how they are presenting not only externally to important clients and prospects, but how are they presenting to each other internally, where there's a lot of credibility on the line. That's what's happening with Save It Like Sully in the near future. Thanks so much again for having me today.
Dan, any last comment?
It's been a masterclass. I said it
Yes.
once, I'll say it again for all of our listeners. Go back, go back, go back. Put this in your favorites because you should listen over and over again. Presentations are such a critical skill for business people, for salespeople. That's our audience. And Anil, you absolutely knocked it out of the park. Thanks for coming on with us.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you, gents.
Thank you for being on the Sales Problem Podcast, Anil. I'm so glad we had you on today. You have given the listeners a ton of information and knowledge where they can thrive and succeed, and you're helping them grow with what they know. So listeners, we love you. We appreciate you. Thanks for listening. Please share this with a friend because they need it. I think they do. Any little component of today, one or two things you can take away, I think it's beautiful. And send it to a friend so they can listen. So we'll see you on our next episode, and keep building the best version of you.